everyone, I'm Buster Green, and welcome back to my comprehensive review of Gundam the Witch from Mercury, Season 2, and we're up to Episode 15 today. If you guys are new to my channel, every Sunday I review Gundam the Witch from Mercury, and right now I am 509 hours away from getting monetized. So please, if everyone watching this video can watch like 2 of my other videos, I will get monetized tomorrow. I'm so close. My numbers have been consistently going up, and it's only 500 hours right now. Like, if one person could watch my channel for 500 hours, that would get me there. Anyway, let's go into stuff. So, if you're just coming in after the last episode, some horrible, major dramatic things went down in the last episode. The Earth Witches staged what was pretty much a school shooting scenario where they shot a bunch of the kids at school and a massive Gundam fight broke out. Lotta Neal is on the verge of death. And finally, Sophie and Soletta have their long-awaited climactic final battle. And it was very, very cool. And then, when it couldn't get any cooler, a super twist came out. It was finally revealed in the last episode that Eri, the baby from the prologue, has somehow turned into the Aerial Gundam or is stuck inside it. We don't exactly know the specifics of how much of Eri is in the Aerial or whether we can ever get her out. But it's really not looking good because she keeps manifesting as a ghost baby everywhere. Anyway, Eri ends up killing Sophie, and Sophie had this incredibly super depressing death where she lamented that her biggest regret in life was that she was poor as fuck and she could never afford manga and video games. And you know what? That resonates with me. That kind of feels like how I'm gonna die too. A poll was conducted after the fact about whether or not Sophie was a horrible, poor, exploited, cute, fluffy girl we should all feel pitiful for, or a batshit psycho Earth terrorist Columbine killer who enjoyed killing people for fun. And in the end, 60% of people think we should feel bad for her, so let's take a moment of silence and feel bad for this poor, fluffy girl. Anyway, now the million-dollar question is whether or not Soletta will give a fuck, because up to now, Soletta has been a little bit of an out-of-touch psycho who hasn't seemed to care when she's had to get her hands dirty and murdered some people. Chances are she's been murdering people for a while, as her sister did. But at the same time, the only person who's died in the show that she really gave a shit about was Elon 4, and technically, she still hasn't found out he died because stunt doubles. Now, the big question is, will Sophie's death affect Soletta any differently? Because Sophie and Soletta actually hung out together for a week, and I would like to think they were friends in that time. Who knows? And another big question is whether or not Miorine will ever go back to the school and re-enter the modern stakes of the show. Anyway, let's start the next episode, which starts off in a dingy industrial puddle on the poor planet Earth. So this episode just completely changes things up, and it takes us to the Earth, where we get our first good look at the situation on Earth. It's really unclear what the hell is going on, but we got people everywhere living in refugee camps. They're poor, they're rationing resources, and then this group is here repairing some mobile suits. In this episode, we suddenly have a brand new main character, and this new character is a dude named Alcott. He might have appeared before in a background of another episode, but this is the first time we really get to know him as a person, and for all intents and purposes, he's the main character of this episode. Then we see him yelling at some guy in a bathroom with some kids, and it turns out that the guy in the bathroom is Bob. Bob is in a state of post-traumatic stress from accidentally murdering his father, a big horrible thing that he still hasn't gotten over. And he's trying to starve himself to death, and leader Alcott will not let him do this. So Alcott force feeds him cornbread and just shoves it in his mouth. Alcott knows exactly who Bob is, and he says that Bob is the bargaining chip, so he can't allow him to starve to death. So if you're a little bit confused, because last time we saw Bob, he was in space, the Earth terrorists must have somehow captured Bob after the Quetta incident and taken him back to their school on Earth. Super neato. Cue the opening, and holy shit, you guys, check this out. Remember how there was a ghost of Eri in the opening? This week they've switched it up from being a sad, empty ghost shape to fuck yeah, Eri's alive. I'm kinda stoked to see her now. She looks so thrilled. Anyway, back to the episode. I guess we're sticking it out on Earth for this episode, and Noria cues up that they blew their cover with the school shooting incident. So all the terrorists who have been living at the school, they have to leave because now everyone knows where they're from and they figured out where they're living. Elsewhere though, Noria is kicking Nika's ass, and this is a really interesting scene. It's probably the coolest thing Noria's done in the show so far, but if you love Nika, this scene is super sad. Noria just screams that Nika is treacherous and she's endangered the family on Earth, and Nika justifies it because Noria was out of control on a killing spree and thinks that if Noria is an out of control killer, no one will ever take her seriously. So then the Nika abuse just accelerates, and then Shadiq's harem steps out and they try to stop Noria from killing Nika, but Noria blames Nika for fucking everything up, so she's not stopping. Shadiq, meanwhile, is in the back room behind them, and he's gloating to his dad that he pretty much runs the school at this point, and his dad is so not amused by all this. So then Shadiq decides to explain his evil plan to his dad, and Shadiq explains that fundamentally his goal is that he wants to break the war and corporate economy cycle that exists in this world. Because in this world, there are three main companies, Jaturk, Grassley, and Pale, and they're all wasting their money on mobile suit development. And then the mobile suit development allows them to have wars with the Earth, and then the people having the wars with the Earth spend the money to the corporations, which feeds the economy so the corporations can make more mobile suits, etc., etc. And Shadiq thinks that only he can break the stalemate, and his plan to break it is just by simply giving the Earth a better stake in the economy, which will allow them to have more weapons and be therefore a considerable force that will stop the other corporations from bullying them. So yeah, the current situation is just that three jerk-ass corporations are bullying the entire Earth and making everyone poor and sad. If you're not reading between the lines, this is kind of a metaphor for modern life. But yeah, fundamentally Shadiq thinks that Earth could be stronger, and if it was, corporations won't fuck with it anymore. At this point in the show, Shadiq has kind of turned himself into a reverse Char Aznable. Anyway, we also get a huge twist in the scene that Shadiq is a half Earthian, and despite only being a half Earthian, he identifies as a full Earthian. As a full Earthian myself, I can get why you'd want to identify as one. But anyway, this is a kind of an ethnicity thing, or maybe it's a pronoun issue. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to judge anyone's pronouns, but Shadiq has decided his pronoun is Earthian. Anyway, after that, we see this gang of Benner Group MSs flying over a major city on Earth. They have these hover platforms that look like the ones from the original Gundam. And then we see Cathedral doing something, and this is the first time they've done anything in the entire series, because the prologue said they'd be an evil Titans faction oppressing people. But this is the first time we actually see them oppress anyone. Anyway, at the same time, Miorine is meeting with some of the head honchos in Cathedral, and she's gone there on a visit because she wants to get more information about the Quiet Zero to decide whether or not she's going to go along with Prosper's evil plan or not. But yeah, back on the Earth, the terrorists are freaked out and they're trying to evacuate the school where they've been living. Honestly, there's a lot of people living in the school, over 500 I'd have to guess. So it's actually a huge hassle because I guess none of them want to deal with the cops. Plus the fact that Cathedral seems like they're going to just straight up kill them. So everyone's just trying to evacuate. And at the same time, a bunch of kids got together and they made a grave on Earth for Sophie, who died as a hero. Wow, fuck. Sophie really died a hero on Earth. That's really sad. She had a Famicom and everything. Damn that Gundam. Anyway, at this point we see this guy who looks like Borat, and he has his own unique Earth MS. All the Earth people are using this similar mobile suit. I didn't catch the name, but we now get into a really classic Gundam battle scenario where all the Earth terrorists are using these mobile suits to defend the civilian evacuation from the Benneric Group's retaliation fascist army that's going to kill the civilians. We see Bob again. Bob's still living in a toilet, and he's being guarded by these angry kids. Bob gets re-traumatized by this little girl who's really mad at him because the little girl, her dad was killed by Spacians, Bob is a Spacian, and therefore the little girl is thinking that Bob is the guy that killed her dad. Anyway, then Alcott drops that the Jerk Industry Company has gone bankrupt from the combination of the CEO being dead and potential retaliation for the Plant Quetta incident. And this all freaks Bob out. But before we can even stay on that, at this point we have some amazing Gundam style ground combat happening. The Earthian mobile suits are kind of very similar to Zaku's or Rickdom's, and they have this shootout in front of the school, and all of a sudden the school gets hit, and the hit brings down the roof on Bob and the kids. Now we get some more shots of this Borat guy. Apparently Borat is an ace pilot, and then Alcott has this horrible flashback to the day his kid brother burned to death, being crushed in a building fire. And the reason he just had this flashback is the sad little girl from the bathroom also just got crashed by the roof. Oh, and even sadder, she's actually still alive, but Alcott wants to leave her for dead because in the situation where they're in, they don't have any medical supplies to save her, and there's no real safe way they can get her out of the building or to anywhere where she can rest. Goljaturk has meanwhile disappeared in the building collapse, and we learn that Alcott has a robot arm from the previous injury that killed his brother. Anyway, Alcott can't take it anymore, so he gets into a mobile suit and just starts racking up some kills with this giant X-Acto knife lance, which looks fucking sick. In a surprise hero moment, Bob has decided to pick up the dying girl and is trying to do his best to save her. So he runs her outside piggyback style, and Bob is honestly home free at this point, but he's got to save the little girl because he's empathizing with her, and quite frankly for Bob, there's no good way to do that. Another one of the Earth soldiers named Philip dies. Philip dies, and as he dies, in a very Gundam-style moment, we learn that he had a wife and a kid. I'm not sure if these characters will ever show up later, but they're identified. Then Bessie, the guy who looks like Borat, runs out of ammo, so he starts going in with some hard Dom melee tactics. But Borat suddenly dies a gruesome death when his cockpit is shot out. His cockpit lands right in front of Bob. Bob sees the dead body, and Bob pukes. But he notices that even though Borat just died and the cockpit was damaged, the mobile suit is still otherwise working. So he decides that he's going to steal this mobile suit and use it to escape and rescue the little girl. This is kind of a shit plan because all the mobile suits in the area are actively targeting these kind of mobile suits for the raid, but hey, if anyone can pull it off, maybe it's Bob. Now at this point, Captain Fatboy shows up and gives us this backstory on Alcott, because Alcott has been the main character of this episode, and Alcott is apparently also a fake name. His real name is Ridrick Kruger, and he was originally a member of Cathedral until one day he switched sides to fight for the Earth terrorists. And in a very cool Gundam scene, Alcott basically responds to Fatty's take on the story and remarks that he switched sides because his little brother died, and when his brother died, he stopped caring about anything because his family was killed and he had nothing to live for anymore. So then we see either a missile going off or possibly it's a spaceship launch. No, actually, it's Bob in the mobile suit he just stole. Somehow he pressed a button and boost maxed it into the air in a super crazy blast-off move. Anyway, doing this distracted everyone and gave the Earth guys a chance to win the battle, but horrifically, the girl died from the G-forces of the boost. Holy fuck. You are watching Gundam. And that's the end of it. Bob goes back to the graveyard and buries the little girl next to Sophie. Bob has a major character moment at this point, and Alcott is so seemingly touched by what Bob did for the girl that he just gives Bob his freedom and leaves him to be a free man. Unfortunately, Bob has no idea where he is and doesn't know his way around the Earth, so he asks Alcott for some directions back to the orbital permit lift, which sounds like some kind of spaceport place. Bob has decided that he's not going to lose anything else that connects him to his father, so it sounds like he needs to get back into space, and he's going to try to save Jeturk Industries. So this is our biggest major plot development for what Bob's doing in the entire show, and Bob, for the first time in probably his entire life, has purpose again. Anyway, that's basically the end of the episode, but we get a really thick post-credits teaser where we go back to Miorine and we see the rest of her scene with the Cathedral Dude. Cathedral Dude gives her some tea and explains that the Quiet Zero theoretically should not work, but he thinks that it's based on Miorine's mom's work as a plant scientist, and that she somehow figured out a way to apply plant biology to humans, whatever that means. And it turns out that Miriam's mom really did come up with Quiet Zero, and then he goes over the backstory about how Miriam's parents got married and what the world was like when they did. We really don't know much about the world before the prologue, but this guy says that it was filled with Gundams and death, and seemingly there was an erosion in the base concept of what a human being is. Based on that line of dialogue, I'm starting to think that possibly Cathedral was justified if the overall goal of the Gundam researchers was to turn human beings into Gundams, like what happened with Eri. So what goes on here is then they discussed Miriam's whole marriage situation. Miriam doesn't really understand her father, and she's starting to think that the marriage game was primarily created to cover up the Quiet Zero, and that Delling was just hoping Miriam would marry someone who was a powerful mobile suit pilot. But in the end, the Cathedral dude tells Miriam that everything his father planned was kind of bullshit, and Miriam is a free person who should just do whatever she wants with her life. And I think if he's talking about both the Quiet Zero situation and the arranged marriage to Soletta, this opens up a huge door for Miriam that she could just go completely off the plan and do whatever the hell she wants and escape again. Because technically, if Miriam chose not to pursue Quiet Zero and chose not to marry Soletta as well, because, Soletta's a merciless murderer, that would completely destroy Lady Prospera's world domination plan. So, wow, this is a crazy moment in the show. At this moment, the show has almost completely gone off the rails, and if Miriam runs away on top of that, that would completely put the show off the rails. Because, let's face it, this show's been pretty weird. It's been like a wacky schoolgirl show with some lesbians and the occasional mobile suit duel like it's G Gundam. But this episode was a major return to classic Gundam format. This episode was pretty much an episode of the OFMS team with all the ground combat in this one. We had a bunch of soulless men with mustaches fighting to the death, and this dead girl? That's disturbing as shit. That is like so disturbing that I feel like the only person who would kill this girl would be Yoshiyuki Tomino himself. But yeah, they really doubled down on the classic Gundam formula here. And sure, season 1 of Witch from Mercury was all these like wonderful happy girls in this wacky robot college, but here we're right back into your classic Gundam bullshit and war crimes. And you know what? I really hope Miriam doesn't come back, because that would just completely jeopardize Lady Prospera's plan, combined with the whole Shadik's weird power play over his dad and Ghoul being off the grid. The only people who still give a shit about the school are Elon 5, but Elon 5 is a stunt double. Real Elon is probably off in Miami doing more war crimes, and the only person who really gives a shit about going to school right now is Soletta. So we don't even know where Soletta's mind is at, because maybe not, she's traumatized for killing Sophie. And you know what? I really do feel bad about Sophie. She's getting a hero's funeral on Earth, and this episode really shifted the perspective that Sophie was a hero to the people on Earth. Sure, she was a kill-happy psycho, but she saved... Well, I mean, she did a good thing for the Earth people, but I mean, fundamentally... I don't know, the whole, was she a hero, was she a terrorist? It's a massive, perspective thing that I think Gundam does really well, that shows you that, one country's terrorist is another country's hero. It's really, really fascinating and a great mental exercise, and that's kind of why I watched the show. But yeah, Sophie, hero to Earth, terrorist to space. But yeah, so Soletta was not in this episode at all. We still don't know if there was additional fallout from the area's aerial reveal. Soletta probably knows that, right? Or if not, she's at least got base awareness that the Gundam pieces are alive because she talks to them so much. But it's really interesting that this is the first episode that completely just did not have Soletta in it. I think this is the first time she hasn't been an episode at all. Miriam at least got her 2 scenes in, but at this point, if anyone's keeping track, let me know. has Mercury now officially been in more episodes than Soletta? I mean, I guess technically neither of them were in the prologue, but still. I once again have to wonder if Soletta is actually the main character or not. Or hell, like, technically... No, I guess the Aerial Gundam wasn't in this episode either, because I was about to think maybe Eri was the main character or not, but... Yeah, at this point, Mercury is probably the character that's been in the most episodes. I'd definitely like to see a count of every episode featuring either Eri, Ariel, Soletta, Mercury, and Prospera to see who's been in the most episodes at this point, because they're all like in the running for being the main character. But yeah, this episode was classic Gundam. I loved it. I love that it fucking had mustache guys and mobile suits and DOMs and gratuitous child death. So yeah, we're officially back in Gundam, and I'm all here for it. All right, let me know what you guys think. Do you feel bad for everything that's going on? Do you side with the Earthians? Do you side with the Spacians? Let me know. Catch you guys next week. Later.